Okay, welcome back. Glad you're along this evening. It's 10 o'clock on the East Coast, 7 o'clock out here on the West, and even earlier than that in Hawaii. Now, we're going to talk to Michael Tsarion. He is in Ireland, and he has done research the likes of which I've never seen in my lifetime, and it is always a pleasure to talk to him. We're going to talk about a number of things this evening, and let's first of all find out if he is there and up and at him. Are you there?
Hello, Jeff. It's Michael. Yep. Nice to be on the show.
Well, welcome back. Don't know how many years it's been since you've been coming and going, but you keep piling on the research, and it's amazing what you've come up with. There's no one else in your league. And it's
Thank you. It's always nice to be on your show. It was the first ever show with you that the first interview I ever did on the Irish origins concept. So it's nice to be back to follow up on that.
Oh, great. Well, I'll remember that always. And at first I said, wait a minute, what's he talking about? But within 5 minutes, anybody with an honest, open mind would have to agree that you have some amazing data. And how many years have you been after this now?
The Irish origins studies were taking me right back to 1982.
Wow. Well, I've been on the air 17 years, 1994, so you predate that by 12 years, and that you must have been a mere lad when you started out on this.
Yeah. I had access to a few books. It really didn't pick up until 82, is because then I came to the States for the first time. I was able to get rare out-of-print books from groups like Kessinger and Health Research and so many other places that were not available in Europe, or at least you'd have to be an antiquarian in Europe. You would have had to buy them as first editions or hardbacks, which cost many hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, whereas in America these things were a lot more available. So it picked up very, very strongly in 82, and I assiduously studied what was out there in those days. Of course, I didn't have the theories I have now, but the study started in earnest in 79, and then picked up greatly in 82, and then just continued from there. I just couldn't put it down. You see, people think it's amazing, but it's not really if you just don't let it go. I just keep studying and keep it. It's an interest, so you just keep on going with it and don't leave it down, and eventually you're able to. You're really up to speed on a lot of the theories. And then since that period, we've had also fantastic other writers and researchers like Ralph Ellis and Mustafa Gadala and Ahmed Osman and a lot of other people who've then continued to carry on the work that was maybe done in the 19th century, which completely got forgotten because it was so powerful. The establishment didn't want to know about the L.A. Waddells or the Commons Beaumonts and the Macadaris, all these people that I dedicate my work to. But fortunately, then in the late 80s and 90s, other scholars came along to re-explore the whole question of Egypt and the whole question of the movement of the races, and how did that pyramid get there? How did the civilization, how did it actually get started, and who was the people who started it? And then we have all of the other lie mechanisms, of course, which you have to negotiate and plow through. There's a whole cult since the 1970s funded by the United Nations of the Afrocentrists who try to convince the world, and have done a pretty good job doing that, of that, it was the Africans who created the Nile civilizations. And there's no real hard evidence for that, but yet that was picked up by the media and by the Smithsonian and the National Geographic and all of these other orgs, which are highly suspect, and they push this for all they're worth, and it's not sustainable. But at the same time, you're stuck with having to then rebut it, and these latest discoveries do rebut it. Even the discoveries of Sigmund Freud at the turn of the century rebutted it. But they don't care. The establishment doesn't care what facts are. They're going to hit you with whatever media spin that turns the whole of reality upside down. And my job then started in the 90s, start focusing on this level of disinformation, and through deconstructing the disinformation, that's when I finally came up with the theories that I've published now in '07. But that was not through so much of a constructive process. It was more through a deconstructive process of plowing through the welter of lies that have been disseminated about Egypt, about Ireland, about the age of catastrophe, and about so many other things in this life.
What we commonly know and understand about Giza and Egypt and Egyptian civilization is, I hate to use the term, but it's essentially a lie. What other word would you use? It's a lie, and there are people promulgating this lie who know damn well that it's not true. But they've got money, they've got ego invested. It's a big tourism industry, and we don't want to slight the black races of Africa, but unfortunately, the DNA is not to be argued with. And in a few minutes, under Michael's name at Runts.com, I'm going to be putting up a picture of King Tut. And Michael knows this picture extremely well. Many of you have seen it, I'm sure, but I'm going to put it up again just to give you an idea. They have reconstructed from the mummy and the DNA what this man, in all likelihood, looked like. He was a young man when he died. He doesn't, let me just put it this way, he's not of African heritage. It's clear he's of European ancestry, and where he came from, how he came to be there, Michael would probably be able to tell us better than anyone else, if anyone can. But it's clear that this man is Northern European. The features are quite amazing, and when you see the picture in a few minutes, keep reloading the home page. James will get the picture up there. I think you'll be shocked. Most people would think, well, we'll see another Barack Obama or something like that. No. And Obama trying to claim ancient Egyptian heritage amuses me to no end. I forget which pharaoh he claims to look exactly like, but it all gets to be out of hand.
Yeah, he was claiming to look like Amenhotep IV, who's known as Akhenaten. That's considered to be... that's Tutankhamun's father. So, that could change, but the consensus is that Akhenaten was Tutankhamun's father, and Nefertiti was the mother of Tutankhamun. There's other scholars, of course, have different takes on this, but that is the general idea until new evidence comes forth to change that. And Nefertiti is a very important character because she has been the one, in fact, of that particular dynasty, that particular family, that many scholars through the hundreds of years have suspected was of Western ancestry. So to find out now through the most up-to-date science, DNA science, that in fact her son is directly, non-negotiably of Western ancestry is a huge vindication, not only from my work, because I am probably the only scholar who has said that, because other scholars have tacitly admitted that there's some sort of connection between the East and the West.
Right.
But not a single other scholar that I know of, apart from the Commons Beaumont of the turn of the 1960s, and Conor McDowell and Anna Wilkes, the people that my books are dedicated to, other than them, and perhaps the American Ignatius Donnelly, have ever suggested that the actual kings of Sumeria, Babylon, and Assyria, and Egypt, and so on and so forth, including many of the characters mentioned in the Bible, by the way, actually came from the West. This has been stated, but all of those scholars are completely suppressed. My work is to carry on their legacy. Mm-hmm. But I must add again that the Nefertiti thing has always been a question mark, not only because of her facial features, but because her ancestry has been completely removed. All the books that are official say, oh, nothing's known about her, her family line isn't known. In other words, there's been a very big cover-up to make sure that nobody can track her back at all, apart from herself. And that, I believe that I smelled a rat with that, because that seemed to me that there was an obvious campaign to make sure that her ancestry would not be known. And in my work, I've always claimed that she was a Scythian, which is a term that basically loosely means Gaelic. And of course, if you're speaking Gaels, then you are definitely speaking Western Europeans or Irish, or at least the European Celts, if you have to use that word. And so then now to find out, I repeat again, that now that the science, the genetic science shows that her son was of European ancestry, it is now a no-brainer that the 6 other daughters and the mother and potentially even the father, that's Akhenaten, were of the same Western descent or heritage.
Yeah, we did get right to the point where you were making it quite clear that the sisters and the husband were probably also of Western European extraction, and that's clear. There is, again, an awful lot. If you just do a simple search for King Tut in any search engine and look for images, you will find pictures of him, and there's just no question about it. I mean, the man is not of African DNA descent. Let's not take anything away from the African cultures, and they've made their contributions. But ancient Egypt is a construct of people who have scrubbed the historical records and made damn sure that we don't have access, and thanks to Michael we do now, to the concepts that are crucial in understanding what really went on in ancient Egypt with those pyramids. So who is behind the confiscation, as it were, of the data and literature that pointed to Western European or Gaelic heritage, in at least in terms of that particular dynastic family?
Oh, it's that particular family's history has been skewed beyond all recognition. The main perpetrators are the British Crown and also their cousins in Germany, the Bavarian government, the Bavarian royals. Anyone who's had any kind of occupation, this probably even goes for Napoleon and his gang, but much less them than the British government, who even worked through the Islamic, because remember, everyone knows, or should know, it's a general known fact that the desecration that took place to the actual temples and statuary of Egypt was done by the Arabs, the later Arabs, who didn't want this pagan, didn't want these pagan civilizations to be known, and went around and defaced and so on and so forth. But I think the true story there is, again, that these people were often funded to do this. There was a campaign. This is picked up in the book by Gerald O'Farrell called The Tutankhamun Deception, which is a very important book.
Sounds like a great read.
Certainly the British government.
Yeah, that sounds like a good book.
Yes, it is. And the Vatican is also involved because, of course, who was it who colonized Ireland and made sure that the original pagan indigenous culture there was suppressed beyond all control? Originally, it was the Merovingian dynasty, the Templars of Burgundy in France, who came over, and they're known in the Irish context as the Chaldeans. These are early Christian monks. But their history I've gone into, it's very interesting. They were responsible for suppressing the Druidic culture. As I was saying just before the break, the Irish annals and legends speak about the daughter of Akhenaten coming and residing in Ireland and dying there. Her grave is there. Lorraine Evans, in a book called The Kingdom of the Ark, is a very top-level archaeologist who specializes in digging up Egyptian relics in England, in Britain. Her book is full of examples of this. Egyptian beads, Egyptian torques, bracelets, jewelry, even boats have been discovered. Then you have the great scholar L.A. Waddell, again, of the turn of the century, 19th century, highly suppressed author, a genius linguist. He was a contemporary of Schielman, the man who discovered Troy. These men were contemporaries. They were some of the first scholars in history to even see, let alone decode and interpret Sumerian script. So great giants of the world that have been completely forgotten because of what they discovered. And while L.A. Waddell, one of his greatest discoveries, which is pertinent to what we're talking about, was that he discovered the grave of the first king of the first dynasty of Egypt is in Northern Ireland. King Menes is buried in Northern Ireland. What's he doing there? Why did he go there? So we have Skota, as I say, real name Meritaten, daughter of Akhenaten, sister of Tutankhamun, buried in Ireland.
Okay, now these,
Israelites
Michael, excuse me. These graves, have you been to them? Are they actually identifiable? Are they located on a map?
Okay, yes, they are. The location, it's all in the Irish Origins book, but the location in Northern Ireland of Menez has been defaced, but it is at a place called Knockmany in County Tyrone. All right, the Tia Tefi, another Egyptian priestess or queen, is buried near at a definable location, absolutely near Tara.
Well, what do we think here? Were they taken home to their area of origin for their final resting? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah, absolutely. They were going back to because they knew where the fount of all wisdom and knowledge and the fount of their civilization. The gods Ra, the gods Osiris, the god Horus, all are later descendants of Nordic and British or Irish, if you're using the pure sense. I don't just mean Ireland when I say Ireland. I mean the Druids, the Arya, the High Arya, who had colleges throughout the world. Well, those colleges, as the Irish annals and the ancient legends of Ireland confirm, were all over the world, right down into Egypt. But the legends have always been taken for legends, and the myths have always been taken for myths. Why? Because those are talismanic words. You put the word legend on something and people dismiss it. You say something's a myth, and of course the words in their pure sense, I'm not saying that the words in their pure sense don't have a true meaning, but those words have been used talismanically to make sure that people will dismiss what they actually say. So when I went to the legend, you see, and then again as the evidence of my own eyes, but absolutely, Scota's grave is down in County Kerry, and the only controversy that surrounds it is that maybe that's not her grave specifically, but it may be a granddaughter. But either way, apart from that little controversy, it is known that the family were there. There's no question that Scota, that was what her nickname was, that's how Scotland got its name. Scotland is named, and in the Annals of Scotland, these are the early Annals of Scotland, that's what it says. This is not Michael Pissarian saying this. This is Scottish official history.
That's amazing.
I mean, there's a reason why the British Queen to this day, this is pertinent to your question about who's controlling all of this, the British Queen is sitting on a replica of the Tara throne, the coronation chair that all the kings of England, it's actually technically called St. Edward's chair, is the Irish seat of the kings in Tara, was taken to Scotland and then moved to England, and it's identical to the chair that she sits on to this
back with
very
Michael
day.
Pissarian. His website is like a university. The knowledge is just incredible. It is detailed, it is scholarly, it is academic, it is irrefutable. So please go to Michael's website. Prepare yourself. It's like nothing you've ever seen. Now, the idea that Egyptian royalty went home to be buried in the area of Ireland is fascinating to people. The idea that the Queen sits upon that same throne, or chair, I guess is what it really is fascinating. But I've got, if you go to rense.com, look in the guest section, we've got that picture of King Tut up there now, and take a look at this gentleman and ask yourself, where might he have come from? Well, the DNA is, you don't argue with DNA. Quite a picture, and they've done a really remarkable job getting the skin tones right and all the rest of it. Okay, go right ahead. What happened after the Gaelic, if you will, or Western influence in the Egyptian royalty after the Tut dynasty? Did it change?
Well, this is where all these scholars have come in with their different theories, because, of course, this particular dynasty, Akhenaten, wreaked so much havoc in Egypt that the country rose up against them and they were thrown out, and then they fall off the map. Nobody knows what happened to Akhenaten. He's presumed dead. Tutankhamun's body has been discovered, so he did die at age 17 from poisoning or from some other kind of violence. Nefertiti, the quest went on to find her remains. The expert on that is Lorraine Evans is very into that, and there's a couple of other great scholars who have written that. There's a book called Search for Nefertiti that gives you the updated information on that. Of course, she is described also as being very fair, her complexion, and as I said, her heredity seemed to be very much downplayed, if you want the truth, and that alerted me specifically. But then my story picks up that after the dynasties left, they did move to several places, and I went exactly by what the ancient Irish annals say. They were Satanists, and in Ireland they're known in the annals as the Milesians, based on one of the names of their king, Neil, and that they are said to have gone back to Scythia. I mean, it's right there. It's not me saying it. This translation into English was done in the 1600s, so you can imagine how old the actual texts are. They're hundreds of years old, if not thousands. The legends themselves go back to the earliest periods of Ireland, and in those legends they say that Scota and Meal and the Atnists came to Ireland. Now, part of the skewing of facts involves, of course, the dating. This is the big problem, because according to the monkish legends and according to the general understanding, these Milesian Atnist Egyptians came over from Spain into Ireland as the Gaels approximately 500 or 600 years BC. I grew up believing that, or at least knowing that. But my research now, in the latest days, I think that has been seriously misstated. I think they came a lot earlier. They were there at least 400 years more, which means 1,000 years BC. Not 600, but probably even 1,000 to 1,200, and that's still an ongoing question mark on that one. But I myself am convinced that it was at least 500 to 600 years, if not more, earlier than all the official legends say, and that will change history again. But then, as I said, Scota gave her name first to Ireland. Did you know that Ireland, one of its earliest names, was Scota?
No.
And that's how, when the Irish crossed over into Scotland, they brought the name with them. So the Scots get their name from the Irish settlers, whose own country was first named after the Egyptian queen.
How funny.
So it's right in our heritage. This is not bogus or fringe. This is official. This is well known, and the grave sites are there. They're being excavated, but who's doing the excavations? The problem is, you're up against a Jesuit order. You're up against a British crown. These colonizers who desecrated the land from the beginning. You know, these
not
are people,
encouraging.
like I said, no, exactly not encouraging. And they also funded the desecration of Egypt itself. The Chaldeans, by the way, who were the quote-unquote monkish order of Christians who assisted in the suppression of the original Druids, did you know that they were the actual tutors of the Duke of Burgundy and the top-level Merovingian dynasties? The top Templar families were educated by Irish monks who had plagiarized the Druidic knowledge and therefore were transmitting this esoteric knowledge. So when people feel the Druidic symbolism on the flags and the heraldry and all this weird occult symbolism and Egyptian symbolism, as Jordan Maxwell has pointed out so many times, people are wondering where it comes from. It's because it's been plagiarized and it was taught to the elite families. Did you know that Vatican City is aligned geomantically and geospherically to Tara?
No.
Did you know that the pyramid in Egypt is aligned perfectly geomantically to the Isle of Lewis, which was the headquarters of the Druids in Scotland, and so forth and so on? That many of the civic centers and many of the religious headquarters, including, as I said, the Vatican, are actually aligned with ancient sites such as Newgrange and Stonehenge. Not negotiable, factual geometry, provable.
Amazing.
Now, if so if these civilizations are later, but they're deferring, the designers of those cities are aware, because they're Masonic, of course, they're aware that these sites in Ireland are sacred. That's why they're aligning the doorways, the windows, and the entire piazzas and all the rest of it. That's why there's 20 Egyptian obelisks in the world, and 13 of them just happen to be in Vatican City. Pure coincidence. And the other ones are in London and Washington. Pure coincidence, you see? So there's an enormous subject here. And now this vindicating piece of information not only suggests that there was some, okay, we can agree, oh yeah, all right, we will agree there's some sort of east to west connection. I guess we got to accept that. No. This goes far and away beyond that. This is much more deep than just finding cocaine, you know, in the tombs of the mummies, or pictures of elephants in South America and parrot feathers in Egypt and all of this other stuff that's come up anecdotally over the years. This is absolute vindication for those people who said, no, it's not just that these people visited or being thrown out, like you asked earlier, moved westward in a vain attempt to find a new home. No, this shows that their origin originally, not visitation, but their ancestry came from the West in a direct west to east movement. That blows the whole thing wide open. And I'm glad you put the pictures up, because remember, Zahi Hawass adamantly refused to release this information when it came out. It's not official. This was leaked by people on the team and from behind the scenes silently. The head men adamantly said, it's in the report, I have it. It says, I will not release it. They were so frightened of what this means for the Afrocentrists and all of the other bogus stuff that's come out from the universities, and what the people will realize when they find that this there's no merit in it. So there's a complete clamp down.
Yeah, I got it.
That you're putting up in the article is completely leaked.
Well,
what does that tell you?
Yeah, it tells me tons. All right, back in just a minute with Michael as we continue. Again, his website is a treasure trove of real history, real academic, scholarly examinations of what happened in the past, not the party line crap that is pervaded today as being the truth. Go to Michael's website, you'll be amazed. Now, this issue of so much, the genesis of modern civilization, we'll go back, a couple thousand years, we'll call it modern, because it's not Peking man. It's the roots of what we deal with today came from the area which is now known as Ireland. And Michael has made an astonishing case. Have you begun to get any, and I don't like a lot of people in the academic community because they're frauds. They're ego trippers. They live on grants. They'll do anything. They're basically whores, a lot of them. And people who come along and shake the boat, who live within the system, which you don't, often have their careers ruined. Many a geologist an archaeologist has had his or her career destroyed because they won't go along with the party line. So what kind of support have you been getting, Michael? I can't imagine anybody with half a brain looking at your material and not being stunned, just for openers.
It's just ordinary people. I don't get any invitations or communiques.
Yeah,
not that I'm itching for it or anything like that.
They're afraid.
My colleague Andy Power, my colleague Ralph Ellis, we just do our thing. We're just ordinary people. We do our thing. We just, we have no faith in the officialdom. Not that it's all bad, but the general tenure of it, the general focus is disinformation up to gazoo. I mean, I can give you another classic example of that. Everyone looks at that famous golden mask of Tutankhamun, and every single website or magazine, in fact, they've taken it around every country in the world on display, the famous Tutankhamun exhibition. I know a lot of listeners have probably even seen it, or people they know have seen it. Well, guess what? That's not the face of Tutankhamun. That is the face of his brother, Semnakare. That mask was actually made for Semnakare, his brother. And then got moved or shifted over, and has been hitherto. This is you just mentioned it yourself. The charlatanism that proliferates. The very mask that all over the world is identified as Tutankhamun isn't even his face. So where does it begin and where does it end?
It doesn't. Perfect question. It doesn't look like him when you look at the reconstruction. It's compared to the
put in another tomb, completely separate, and only the scholars know that. And the masses of mankind and the Smithsonian and the National Geographic and everything, that Time Magazine and you name it, all these ridiculous museums just to make money and to bamboozle people, put this in front of us. But you know what they didn't put? They didn't put the 70 or more torques. A torque is a piece of jewelry, it's like a sort of a bracelet, and they're also made for the neck. That the Tutankhamun's tomb was awash in torques that are identical to those made in Ireland. They never mentioned that. They're very selective.
Where are those? Where are all those? Where are they now?
Oh, well, that is an amazing. The Rothschild dynasty owned most of the major relics that come out of Egypt. They sequestered it. They sent their agents, and they broke into the tomb of Tutankhamun 8 years before the date of the official opening. Lord Carnarvon is married to a sister of the Rothschild dynasty.
Oh, really?
Funded by them. Yes, and that monstrosity, Carter, that filthy monstrosity, who Carnarvon funded to go in and open the tomb, they had actually gone in with a bunch of local Arab gold diggers, or whatever the name for them is, the tomb breakers.
Right.
He hung out in their house. Carter used to hang out and drink tea at their cafes in Cairo and other places. They were personal friends, and 8 years before the official dates of the opening, they had dug tunnels underneath, broke in, raped the tomb, and for 3 days, in the middle of the night, had a Dakota jet, one of these planes in that era, and shipped all of the contents, not only of that tomb but of others, back to Britain, and they're in the keeping of the Rothschilds. And then the Rothschilds gave some of it to the New York Metropolitan Museum and also the Egyptian museums in Britain, but they did this illegally.
Are you, Michael, are you saying, excuse me, are you saying that 8 years before the tomb was officially found and discovered, they were in there and raped it?
Yep, got all the information in the Irish Origins book. I got a whole chapter on that.
How disgusting. Chapter 10. What an outrage.
Isn't it?
What a fraud.
Oh,
what
and
an incredible
not only
fraud.
And the people who knew about it were murdered. There was a murder campaign that also took place to cover up what was discovered. Because when they actually looted the tomb, you have to understand, they also found things that they did not want published. Maybe the stuff about the West-East connection, but also umpteen other things that they did not want known. And so anyone who was involved in the funding, the lower sort of henchmen, or even some of the scholars, there was a murder campaign.
Well, that's the real curse of
number of them.
That's the real curse of King Tut.
Well, the curse. I'm glad you brought that up. The curse was actually created by the museums of England and the press by way of the Rothschilds to create this spurious, false, not only totally demeaning the Egyptians as if they're some sort of woo-woo men, but at the same time to also create that these tombs would not be robbed by people they didn't want robbing it until they got in and robbed it. And the interesting thing, one of the documents that they found inside the tomb of Tutankhamun was his life story and how he died. Tutankhamun ordered the death of one of the head Atomist priests that he didn't like.
Right.
So when he became a king, he sent his guards to crucify this particular priest of the Temple of the Sun. And in retaliation later on for that king's death, they bludgeoned him to death or poisoned him. They're not quite sure how Tutankhamun died. And then in order to decorate his tomb, they borrowed all of this regalia from his brother's tomb, who was also a king, and moved it all over and has hitherto been presented to us, minus the information about the other artifacts in there that talk about coming from the West, and therefore did this. But then Lorraine Evans and some of these other archaeologists I've told you about who are anti-establishment, or actually they were part of the establishment until they came up against it from their finds, discovered Egyptian beads in these pits in England. And of course you can date it from where it happens to be in the striations of rock and in the soil and so forth and so on. And their discoveries flew in the face of the British establishment. So her book is highly recommended, Kingdom of the Ark. My colleague Andy Power, who wrote Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs, and even though we're not in agreement of every single detail or whatever, this is a very important study that has been written on. And don't forget that there's an entire tie-in here to the Bible through what is known as the Hyksos people, who have been this group of kings, a dynasty in Egypt that has always had a question mark over it as to who they were and, more importantly, where they came from. And the great scholar Ralph Ellis has proven, he was not the first one, there's been many at the turn of the century, like Sigmund Freud and others, who showed that there was a connection between the Hyksos dynasty and the Israelites. The people put before us in the Bible as the Judites and Israelites. People go back to you and I, our previous interview on this. We talked about that. And so there's a biblical tie-in as well. Now, The interesting thing to just put the cap on the idea of the Afrocentrists, I have to say this, as I say, we're not bashing African people, but we are trying to be as factual as we can be. If they were, in fact, the originators of the scintillating empire and civilization on the Nile, which Akhenaten's date, if we take his dynasty family as a date, that's 1,400 years BC. All right. So in 1,400 years, which just leads up to the birth of Jesus, plus the 2,000 that leads up to you and I right now, how come in Africa they never have then duplicated it and built another civilization, or even a quarter of it or a third of it, to show that Africans could have built a civilization, comparable to the Nile? If that hasn't happened, how dare the Smithsonian and other groups come and tell us that it was people out there that made it? It's a completely hideous travesty of the truth. But they will literally pull out any, chimera to hand you, because they'll do anything to cover up the connections between the East and the West and the true story of these migrations and what the old Irish annals that I read mention. They will do anything to have you go and read those. And I have the captions from those annals in my book, so people can read them, the translations of Professor Keating. They're all there, showing that there were these bona fide connections. And there's so many other sources. There's 550 pictures there in the book, and there's umpteen quotes, as you said earlier in your introduction. People can get up to speed on this fascinating cover-up that's taken place throughout the world.
It is. Our history, as we are taught it, as it is brought down generation through generation here in the West, is I guess it's still being tweaked and corrupted, every 20, 30 years, or even more often than that. A sentence here, an inflection there, in the printed text, so to speak, and you've got a different view. I mean, it must be amazing to go back and do what you do to find out what really happened. It must be also very discouraging at times.
Well, see, I've had my own little solar celebration, because this information came out, the summer solstice, the July. So I had my own little 4th of July, raise a glass to the sun, in a way, because it's like, the light, the Masons have always used the light against us. Hey, guess what? It just backfired, and the sun's at its highest point, and this amazing revelation comes out. So I've been extremely, happy and overjoyed about this, because it not only vindicates my work on a personal level, it's also a great sign that no lie can be thrown to the ground forever, that, the truth is going to come out. And I've always predicted that more and more and more of this is going to happen as we go down. I've made a study of it, so I know things about, this place is aligned to this other place. But these are not things that are well known in society. People look at the heraldry of Britain and don't notice that, the fleur-de-lis is on there, or the lion, what it represents, or what the words represent, the terms. These things have always interested me. But it's when great stories like this come out in the mainstream media that then people raise an eyebrow.
Yeah. Okay, I put the story about King Tut's DNA back up in the first news block in headlines at rense.com. Michael, thank you. And boy, I'm just honored to have you on the program. I've known you for many years, and your work is just extraordinary. And without you, I don't know who'd be along in our times to do what you're doing. You're just doing amazing things.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It's a great day to, again, follow up on our first talk. I always thank you for believing in the thesis in the beginning, and this is just a great kudos to that. So again, thank you very much for that opportunity.
My pleasure. All right, take good care, my friend. We'll talk again.
Bye-bye.
Okay, good night. Michael Tsarian. What an amazing thing it is to go back, as he has done, and discovered the real history